everyone! Another Nonfiction November has come to an end, and I wanted to share what I managed to read in the month with you. If you saw my TBR video, you may recall that I had 6 books that I was looking to get to. I knew that I was never going to be able to get to all 6, but it's still fun to have some options depending on what you're feeling. I did manage to finish 2 books, and then I'm slightly more than halfway through a third, and I read 1 chapter of a 4th one. So I will talk about the ones that I did manage to finish and mostly get through, just so you know, in case you were looking to hear my thoughts on a particular book. The ones that I did not get to were The Secret Lives of Color and also the Condé Nast Traveler book of Unforgettable Journeys. So I will not be reviewing those in this one because I did not have time to read them. I purposely pushed these ones to the end because of my stack, just because I had priorities, books that I really wanted to get to. The first one that I did manage to read is the one for record, and let me just dig it out here. It's the big coffee table book. Move over so it fits in the screen. And that is History as They Saw It, Iconic Moments from the Past in Color. This is a collaboration between Wolfgang Wilde and Jordan Lloyd. So Wolfgang Wilde is the one who curated the photos, picked which ones, and then Jordan Lloyd is the actual person who colorized them. So they each have a little couple pages that they write at the beginning and end of the book about what they did to create this. And then it just has a bunch of photos throughout the years that were originally taken in black and white, and then Jordan colorized them for this book. It starts in the late 1940s and works backwards and goes all the way back to the 1830s. As I was going through the book, I actually ended up marking my 3 favorite photos, so I can show those to you if you're curious. My favorite one was of this ice grotto that was taken in 1911. It's in Antarctica. But the colors, the blue in there is just really cool. And obviously this camera, this lighting might not pick these up as brilliantly as they are in person, but that was my favorite photo of them all. I just thought it was such a cool perspective to have. My second favorite photo was this country store on a dirt road on a Sunday afternoon in North Carolina. This was taken in July 1939. Once again, there's just a lot of detail in this photo that it's going to be hard to see and with the reflection of the lamp there, but I just thought it was such a cool depiction of just a moment in time of these people relaxing. And then the final photo was taken in 1925, and it's Sakura Cherry Blossom in Potomac Park in Washington, D.C., and I just thought that was really pretty and cute with the kids in their traditional clothing there. So yeah, hopefully those pictures were at least something that you could sort of see. Those were the ones that stuck out to me the most, but there were a ton of photos in here, a lot of historical information. I found myself kind of going down Wikipedia rabbit holes as I was seeing pictures and then learning about different things. And I will say that the back of the book, there is a breakdown of each photo done by Jordan Lloyd, in which he talks about some of the work that went into colorizing that photo, just the amount of research that he and his team had to do to make sure that they were getting the colors on certain clothing pieces and cars correct. And that was just really impressive. I appreciated getting that extra insight because it did always seem like something that would be incredibly tedious and difficult to get through, but also very satisfying once you've completed it. And that bit at the end kind of seemed to confirm that. As far as my rating for this, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. The only reason it didn't get a full 5 is because I did find the majority of the photos to be very US and UK centric. There were a fair number of photos about wars that those countries were involved in, so there's some intense photos in here, but yeah, just a lot of US, UK. There were definitely other countries too, but I found that to be very heavy on that side of things. But if you have any interest in picking this book up, I highly recommend you do so. It's very cool to flip through it, not only for the historical knowledge that you'll gain, but also just finding out what it takes to actually colorize a photo. The second book that I finished was actually the audiobook that I had lined up, and that was Radium Girls, The Dark Story of America's Shining Women, written by Kate Moore. This was technically an extra book, but it does work for the category of element because it is about radium. And this one was a very intense read at times. There are a lot of names, there's a lot of descriptions about what's happening to the women's bodies, so if you get kind of squeamish with that stuff, I would not necessarily recommend this book. But if you're looking for a deep dive into what radium poisoning can do to a person, you will get a lot of that in here. As far as the audiobook itself, I didn't love the narrator. Like, I got used to her, but I didn't love her voice. And so sometimes there were certain things that she pronounced or the way she said phrases that sort of grated on me. This book follows two groups of women. One of them, we focus in on them in the late 1910s, like around World War I, in New Jersey, and then we have a second group of women that we follow starting a little bit later, like in the 1920s, and they are in Illinois, I believe. And so we start with the women in New Jersey, and we meet a bunch of them, and it describes what their job entails and how they have to take the paintbrush, they dip it in the paint, and then they also are licking it to make the fine point that they need to mark numbers on dials for watches and for airplanes so they glow in the dark. This luminous paint had radium in it. It's part of the mixture, and so the women would get it in their mouths, all over their clothes. The dust would also just be in the room, and the companies at the time did not realize how dangerous it was. But the problem was, when they did find out how dangerous it was, they just denied it completely. And they never took any safety precautions to tell the women not to actually put the paintbrush in their mouths. So it's very angering, and you can follow these different women's stories as their bodies start to be taken over and ravaged by this radium. There is some repetition between the two different groups of women that you follow. Everybody's body reacts sort of similarly, but also has different ways that it gets sick. And so you hear the different details about each woman's body and what happens to them. Jaw necrosis, bones snapping very easily. Yeah, it's pretty gross sometimes, but these women were like very, very strong because the amount of pain they must have been in would have been excruciating. And they do eventually launch a case against companies that they were working for because they were poisoned while at work. And so you follow that storyline as well. You do also get some background on radium as an element and its discovery and sort of what was happening with the radium craze in the early 1900s, before people realized that radium was actually not good for you and you should not be drinking water that has been infused with radium and wearing clothes that glow in the dark. Just wild, the stuff that radium was put into that people, regular consumers, were just using like whatever because they had no idea that it was as bad as it was. And then obviously things have changed since then. But yeah, you're gonna learn a lot in it. There's a lot of names, a lot of gross descriptions. I did end up giving it a 4 out of 5. I felt like there was some repetition there, but still would recommend if it's something that you're interested in checking out. The third book, the one that I started and got more than halfway through but haven't finished yet, is The Disappearing Spoon and Other True Tales of Madness, Love, and the History of the World from the Periodic Table of the Elements. That is a long title. This is written by Sam Kean. I am currently on page 222, and I've got about like 120 more pages to go. There's a lot of notes at the back, which I have been reading as well. But I am also learning a ton in this book, and there is a bit of crossover with this and Radium Girls, because this book does touch on radium and the radium craze in one particular section. But this is looking at the periodic table of the elements and as a whole, looking at all the different elements, the creation of the periodic table, how elements might have been created in our universe way back in the day with the Big Bang, way, way, way long ago. And the beginning of this book was a bit slow for me. There was a lot of kind of intense science talking about things that I really don't have much interest in. If I'm reading a science book, I prefer it to focus on people and the science that they're doing and how that science affects them, rather than just talking about like animals or like the nitty-gritty of how elements are formed with they were talking about shells and, you know, talking about protons, neutrons, electrons, all that stuff. And I can recall some of it. I took chemistry in grade 11, junior year of high school. And that was the last time that I have interacted with chemistry other than through books. And so some of that stuff was coming back to me, but it's also just not something that I'm particularly interested in. So I much prefer it when this book gets into talking about a particular scientist and what they were studying and the tests that they were doing. People were doing some dumb shit back in the day, and still now as well, but there are some great stories in here. I'm learning about a lot of scientists as well that maybe I've heard their name before, but I don't really remember why they're famous. And then also learning about scientists that I've never heard of, and a lot of stuff about like the Nobel Prizes and all that. So you're gonna get a lot of information in here. It's not something you can easily take everything in with because there is so much information being thrown at you, but at least like when each chapter ends, it's not a continual story, so it's easy to sort of take a step back and come back to it a couple days later. This is not a book that I would recommend to everybody because it is pretty deep at times. It goes into the pretty nitty-gritty, but this book also has helped me so far answer at least one trivia question that has come up since I started it. So I imagine there's probably some more information in here that will help me answer future trivia questions. So I like that. I will definitely finish this. It's just taking me a bit longer than I thought it would. The final book that I want to mention, the one that I only read the first chapter of, is Hood Feminism: Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mikki Kendall. I read the first chapter and thought it was great, but my brain was just not in quite the right spot to take it all in, especially with reading this one when it was already kind of challenging me a bit. This one's challenging me in a different way because it's making me look at theories, ideas, movements that I understand to a certain degree, but it's pushing me to learn more. So I will also absolutely continue with this book. I just can't say too much about it now because I've literally only read one chapter. But so far, so good. Already put a sticky note in for a particular phrase that I like, so I imagine there will be a few more before I finish with this book. That is everything I managed to read for Nonfiction November. Not a stellar month, but that's usually how things go for me. I just am not the type of person at this point in my life who can get through a bunch of books in a month. It just never works out that way. I do want to say thank you to Olive for once again hosting this reading initiative, coming up with the prompts, and just generally getting everybody excited about reading nonfiction. If you read nonfiction books for Nonfiction November, let me know what you read and how the reading experience went for you in the comments below. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you later.